CSO Insights studies sales performance. And one of the things that we've seen over the last 5 years is that sales performance is declining. Less salespeople are making their number than had been the case in the past. Win rates on forecasted deals have been dropping. Conversion rates between leads and first conversations are going down. We see that kind of consistent trend. We want to find out why. So we reached out to the sales executives, sales leaders, the thousands of people we work with over the course of a year around the world, and we asked them. And one of the things that they all agreed on was that things are different. What buyers told us is an average large deal right now, when they're in the process of buying something, about 6 or more, 6.4 to be exact, people on the buyer side are involved and have a heavy influence on that decision. And that any sizable purchase takes a good 5 months or more. So that's a lot of buying activity, a lot of selling activity to navigate. So it's true. What sales leaders are saying is true. It is much harder to sell than it used to be. And one of the reasons why, 3/4 of sales leaders tell us that customer expectations are changing significantly. And it makes sense if you think about it, right? Because a professional buyer, a business-to-business buyer, is a consumer first and foremost. And when they're buying things on a consumer basis, that world has changed. It's much more transparent, it's seamless, there's a lot more personalization, customization. So when I go into work, I have that same expectation. To understand this in more detail, we went out to 500 B2B buyers around the world. They represented 25 different industries, and they had to be personally responsible for making decisions of at least $10,000 or greater, and work for organizations that were $250 million or greater. And in working with them, we wanted to uncover 4 things. First of all, was the environment as challenging as salespeople and sales leaders are telling us it is? Secondly, how do buyers view salespeople today? The value they bring, the relationships they have. Thirdly, what expectations do buyers have? What do they want? And then finally, knowing what we know about sales organizations, how well aligned or not are sales organizations to deliver on those expectations? And the good news is that buyers are not biased against salespeople. In fact, 65% said they found value in the discussions they were having with salespeople. Only 3% said they'd really wish for a time when all of their B2B interactions could be done online. A secondary question we asked was about expectations. Thinking about all the salespeople that you work with, do they exceed your expectations, meet them, or fall short of them? And most, 62%, said that salespeople meet their expectations. Only 32% said salespeople were exceeding them. And on the surface, that doesn't sound so bad. It's not a bad thing to meet someone's expectations. But if you think about customer experience work, what you know is that just meeting a customer's expectation means you're very vulnerable. You could lose those relationships, and customers are not loyal when you just meet their expectations. Where you see this play out is we ask some follow-up questions, specifically about how sellers and buyers interact. And we say, okay, when you have a business problem, how do you solve it? We said, pick 3, so not 1, not 2, 3 top resources that you go to when you have a business challenge. How do you solve them? Salespeople came in next to last. So they were literally 9 out of a list of 10. And that has a great impact, and that reflects that meeting expectations stat that I shared. And now if I'm a buyer and I don't view my salespeople as really helping me with business issues, solving problems, the way I engage with them is going to be different. And that continues to play out in the buying process. We asked buyers, given how you work with your salespeople, what is your preference for when you engage them in the buying process? 70% said, I'd rather wait till I've got my needs, my business issues all figured out and prioritized. I've done all that work and I want to start talking about solutions. It's tough when you're in sales because that's some of the conversations you want to have. They prefer to figure out before you're engaged. 44%, almost half, said, I'm going to actually take it to the point of figuring out the solution set, and I'll invite a few people in to present within a narrow box, within a set of confines, because I know what I want. 20% said, I want to figure it all out, and then I'll bring you guys in to bid on a specific solution. So we asked buyers and said, okay, if that's how you prefer to work with your salespeople, how does that work for you? When you engage multiple vendors to come in and serve your needs, how successful is that? Who do you pick? Just shy of 2/3, so 58% said, I usually pick one because they are a little bit better than the others. They don't see a lot of difference, right? And what this sets up is a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, which we call the apathy loop. So from a buyer's perspective, I think my salespeople are fine. They meet my expectations. I don't, however, see them as big problem solvers for me. And because of that, I'm going to engage them late in the process when I think it's more appropriate, when I want someone to tell me about a product. But because of that, putting them in this little box, I'm not really seeing a lot of difference between all of them. And as a result, going back to the beginning, they're fine. They meet my expectations. It is hard to break out of something like apathy. It would be much easier if buyers said, there's one question I wish they all would ask. There's one thing I wish they all would do. But what they said is, salespeople are fine. But despite that being somewhat depressing news, there was good news too. We asked buyers whether or not there were opportunities where they would want to engage salespeople earlier. And they came up with 3 scenarios. The first is that the situation really mattered. In fact, 90%, not 9 or 19, but 90% of these buyers said they'd absolutely be willing to engage a seller earlier if the situation was new, challenging, or complex. Furthermore, the decision-making style mattered. Again, remember there are 6.4 decision makers in these opportunities, and they're all going to make decisions differently. People that view themselves as risk takers were 5 times more likely to want to engage a salesperson early versus those who viewed themselves as skeptical. And then finally, the experience and the expectations matter. Buyers who felt that on the whole their experiences with salespeople were more positive, exceeded expectations, were a lot more likely to bring those salespeople in the front of buying processes, and at the end of the process they were a lot more likely to see they saw a major difference in between their options. So the trick is what are those expectations? How do you exceed them? And we ask that question of buyers in a number of different ways, because it could be a hard thing to define. We wanted to understand the last decisions they made. How did they make them? We wanted to look at what they liked about their salespeople, what were negative defining moments. If they could change one thing about the salespeople they worked with, have them do something consistently and more effectively, what would it be? And no matter how we asked the question, the same 4 things popped up. So that tells us those are things that are really important to buyers. The first was understand my business. Know me. Not all that hard of an expectation, unless you consider the fact that, remember, all these people are being shaped by their consumer experiences. They may have some unrealistic expectations about how much you should know about them, perhaps even prior to meeting them. But they're so precious with their time that any question you might ask that they feel is unnecessary, that you should already know, is a big negative defining moment for buyers. They want you to know everything. The second was very polished communication skills. So if you think about how a salesperson runs their world, there are some very high visibility calls you might rehearse, plan for, nail down to every defining moment. And there are others that are more check-in calls. From the buyer's perspective, they're all the former. Everyone has to be polished and concise and compelling. Every second that they devote to you has to be useful and valuable for them. It has to be like every interaction is the final and a big opportunity. That much preparation, that much communication effort has to go into it. The third expectation was they wanted the salesperson to focus on what was going to happen after the sale. Less focus on the sales process, which of course is important to the salesperson, but a lot more reference and understanding of what's going to happen after I buy this. And even if it's not you as the salesperson who's going to manage that relationship, paint a picture for me for what it's going to be like. Make sure I understand that's what you care about too. And then the fourth and final was provide me insights and perspectives. Educate me, give me thought leadership, make me smarter, help me be successful. Now they're interesting because I shared them in order of priority. That's the priority order that buyers shared them with us. And if you think about it, the first 3 are in some way table stakes. It's hard to really differentiate yourselves by communicating better than perhaps another salesperson chasing some business. But if you don't do those well, it's absolutely easy to be excluded from an opportunity. So perspective is nuanced, and I think a lot of people have assumptions about what it is. First misassumption is that perspective replaces solution selling. You have to be careful of that. Just like as salespeople have sales call objectives for their conversations, buyers have objectives too. And we asked buyers, when you're engaging with a salesperson, what's your objective for that? And they said two things, the most important, above all the rest. Number one, I want to make sure that they leave understanding my needs, and then I want to leave understanding how they're going to help me solve my problems. If those don't happen, the call's not a success. So perspective surrounds that. Perspective is an evolution of solution selling, not a replacement for it. It's the opportunity to differentiate. It's not going to land if those things aren't happening. The second mistake that I think people make is that assuming that perspective fits neatly into a certain part of a conversation or a certain part of a relationship, and it doesn't. So again, we went back to our buyers and we asked, at what point in a conversation do you want to understand, be educated, get smarter, be exposed to thought leadership? Where do you want these insights, this perspective? And they were split almost evenly down the middle. Some wanted that early as a credibility builder to start the conversation off in a more thought-provoking way. Others said, it's completely irrelevant to me until we've had a very deep discussion of needs. All kinds of things can help a client with perspective and insights. But the key is, are you helping that person advance their buying process? So are they going to the next step in their process? Are you helping them make their next decision? Are you helping them expand the definition of what's possible, what their vision for success looks like, helping them reframe what the future opportunity? Again, thinking of that post-sale environment and what they're trying to accomplish. Then finally, have you helped change, maybe enlighten them, maybe help reframe for them what all the possible solutions might be? Buyers' expectations have increased, but there is a way forward through it. Sellers need to look for a broader number of decision makers, understand who's predisposed to invite them into a buying process early. They need to understand the situations that might be more preferable. And they need to work to exceed those 4 expectations around knowing the customer, the high level of communication skills, the post-sale focus, and the ability to provide perspective. The challenge is that today, when we go out and talk to sales executives and sales leaders, what they tell us is that they aren't excelling on those things in their environment today. So think about the very next sales call that you would go on. What would you do differently in light of this information? What might you ask your buyers about how you can serve them more successfully?